So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. We've got lots of you on the phone from different time zones and we're thrilled you're all here. So welcome to the WGSN Barometer webinar, where we're going to, over the next 45 minutes, provide you a really in-depth view of what consumers are thinking and feeling about the top retailers right now. We're using data from our brand new online tracker called Barometer, which is exciting, and we're really excited to share it with you. So I'm Erin McDaniel. I am the SVP of Sales for WGSN here in North America, and here with me today is Sarah Murphy, who is our Barometer Insight Director, and she's great. So before we get started, just a few things to note. There will be time for Q&A, so save those questions. You should find that there's a chat button in the bottom right-hand corner where you can type in your questions. You can do it at any time, and then we'll read them at the end. If we don't get to all of them, we'll be sure to follow up, and we also will be recording it, and that will be available as well. So let's get right into it. So here is our agenda for today. We're going to take you through very quickly what the data is, where we're getting it. Then we're going to cover the retail landscape. We're going to give you a great in-depth overview. We're going to look at online behavior versus offline. We're going to look at what people are in the market for. What are they browsing for? What categories are uptrending? We're also going to look at Gen Z and millennial preferences, and it gets interesting for sure. We're going to also spend some time looking at rankings. We're going to dive into the top US retailers, find out who's on top for brand buzz, ad awareness, overall retail satisfaction, and what's driving those online and in-store purchase drivers. And it gets pretty interesting. So really quickly, the data. Where are we getting this data? Which is a good question. So we're compiling over 120,000 respondents on an annual basis, and we're collecting this data every single day on over 175 people every day, where they fill in an online questionnaire. So you see that kind of down at the bottom. And we ask them everything about them, who they are, their demographics, their behaviors, what did they do last week, where did they go, where did they purchase, what stores did they go into that they're considering for purchasing, and what was their experience, both online and offline. We take all that information onto the far right, and it's updated daily into an online interface that clients can now have access to. So what we're going to share with you today is looking at the US data only, and we're going to take a specific slice and share it with you, but there's much more beyond what we're sharing with you today. So quick look at some of the retailers tracked. We are tracking a total of 250 retailers across the US and UK, and here are some of the key brands in the US that we are tracking. So it ranges anywhere from your Amazon, Target, Express, JCPenney, Kohl's, and more. So really great compilation of retailers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Murphy. So over to you, Sarah.
Great, thanks very much, Erin. So my name's Sarah Murphy. I joined WGSN earlier in the year to launch this exciting new product called Barometer. My background is market research. I have 15 years of experience, both agency and client side, with a real strong focus on syndicated tracking products such as this one. So I'm going to just jump straight into the data, and let's start this presentation by asking, what are consumers doing and buying? So this slide here is essentially showing us where consumers are claiming they spend their disposable income. You can see that food and eating outranks as the top category of what consumers are claiming to be spending their disposable incomes on. I think what's interesting here is that at WGSN, we've been talking about how important experiences are, in particular for those millennials. But this data is showing that the spend actually is highest on food across all age groups. This made us think, maybe should retailers start considering adding a food experience within their store to potentially increase their share of wallet? It's just food for thought, pardon the pun. And what's also interesting is the savings. So if you look at the black dotted line here, you can see that savings takes up a high share of claimed disposable spend amongst the 16 to 24 year age group. That's not a group you might instinctively associate with such conscientiousness, but you can see their proportion of saving with their disposable income is even higher than the 25 to 49-year-olds, and it's actually on a par with the 50 pluses. As an aside, another interesting finding with this disposable income section in the questionnaire was that you can see that those people who claim to be plus size, so the larger sized demographic, do have slightly less disposable income. Now on to shopping behaviour. So what this data is showing us is the proportion of those who've shopped in store in the last week. It's really important to note that all of the measures you can split by channel, both in store and online. So here we're just asking consumers in the last week, what proportion of you shopped in store? And we can see that the data is showing that 48% of the 25 to 34-year-olds said they'd shopped in store in the last week. That's beating out the 35 pluses. So clearly getting the in-store experience right for this age group is more important than ever. And now let's have a look at the data cut by those saying they shopped online. Overall, what's interesting here is that shopping in store is still more prolific, despite the concern everyone has with online players. So there's far more people claiming to have shopped in store than online. Again, we can see the 25 to 34-year-olds are more likely to be shopping in store, so getting the experience right for them is crucial. And I think it's quite interesting, despite this concern everybody has with online players, it's the traditional bricks and mortar. It's still very important in the retail landscape. Moving on to understanding what people are claiming they've browsed in the last week, we can see that browsing behaviour, it's shirts, blouses and dresses are the key categories. And I think where this data becomes all the more powerful and interesting is when we have the ability to track it over time. So this study launched in March this year. So we've been tracking every single day since March, and we're interviewing 175 consumers, and we're asking them all kinds of questions such as this: what have you purchased in the last week? So the previous slide showed browsing behaviour, whereas this slide is showing purchase behaviour. And you can see purchases of tops and t-shirts have a strong lead over dresses, whilst jeans slightly overperform dresses as well. We do get asked quite a lot about activewear, so we wanted to see how this category stacks up versus other key categories. That is the category saturated, or is there potentially still room for growth? Consumers are telling us that they are buying activewear, which is this green line down here, and you can see that it's achieving around 5% compared to tops, which is coming in at over 10%. But I think it's worth noting that this activewear, this green line here, it has dipped of late. So it's certainly a category that retailers should really be keeping an eye on and making sure it doesn't really go out of favour, or at least being ahead of the curve and ahead of the trend if it does. On to the more media focused metrics and looking at awareness of some of the top brands. Please remember, we have only shown the top retailers in the US. We do have data on well over 150 retailers in the US. But this is the competitive set that we've looked at. Here we're looking at unaided awareness. So when we ask women which retailers spring to mind for women's wear, we can see that over a third of women are spontaneously mentioning Macy's. It's the one that comes front of mind, top of mind. JCPenney is the second most spontaneously recalled retailer, with 30% of people spontaneously mentioning them, and with Kohl's and Target in the third and fourth position. So those on the far right, so J. Crew, Bloomingdale's, Zara, Kors, you can see that they do have some room to improve here. What we often find with this measure is that retailers who have a big retail footprint do well on these top of mind awareness measures. So it's not particularly a big surprise that some of the biggest retailers fare well here. But I think what we need to be looking at is those brands that still have a relatively large footprint and they're finding themselves further on the right hand side here. You can see that there is room to improve. And to improve, of course, it would be through avenues such as advertising, marketing strategies, and so on. Moving on to buzz. So this is a net buzz score. So this is where we're asking consumers with a prompted list, unlike the previous measure where we're asking them to come up with retailers top of mind spontaneously without any aid. Here we're providing a prompted list of retailers and we're asking consumers, which of the following brands have you heard something positive about? Have you heard something negative about? And that's within the last month. And we're reporting on the net score. So it's the positives minus the negatives. So here, what happens when we prompt consumers and we give them a list that includes Amazon, we can see that Amazon leapfrogs all the competitors and leads the set. So at the previous slide, if you can see, at unaided level, Amazon isn't ranking particularly high, only 5% spontaneously mention them. But when prompted, you can see Amazon shoots up the rankings. I think retailers should be nervous about this and they should be paying close attention, as you do have significantly more people hearing something positive than negative for Amazon in the last month. In fact, 37% more. Again, if you're on the far right, there is room to be able to move that sentiment towards the left. That's where you want to be, ranking quite high here. And interestingly, only 2% have heard something more positive than negative about Sears in the last month. You can see they're bottom of this sector that we've selected from the data sets. And how important is buzz anyway? So remember, buzz is the sentiment of what's being heard, how positive or negative it is. And it can be anything. It's not just advertising, it's anything. It's word of mouth, it's anything they've seen, read or heard, talking with friends and family. It's all encompassing noise, sentiment, if you like. And we can see that buzz is important. It strongly correlates with consideration. If you were to plot an imaginary trend line here, you'll see that these brands are really strongly correlated on both these measures. So you want to be in the top right quadrant, and we can see Amazon and Target performing quite well when we correlate these measures together. So people are hearing positive noise about Amazon and Target, and they'd also consider them when purchasing. It's essentially where you want to be. Old Navy and Coles are also performing well. Now we're just focusing on advertising awareness. And when we look at ad awareness, we're asking consumers in general who they've seen an ad for in the last month. And we can see that Target achieves the highest cut through, with Walmart a close second. Over half of the panelists we interviewed over the time period have said that they've seen advertising for Target. Clearly doing a good job. Let's now take a closer look at Target's ad awareness. The beauty of having a daily tracker such as this is the ability to see exactly when the peaks and troughs occur around times of marketing campaigns. So when we drill down and we look at why Target is faring so well for advertising awareness, we're actually able to see two key peaks, one in May and one in August. And both of those peaks correspond with their campaigns. The first one here, which was the Run and Done campaign. And then secondly, in August, their Back to School campaign. This is showing that these campaigns are getting traction with consumers, which of course I'm sure will be reassuring for them in light of the fact that they have a relatively new CMO. I think what's important here as well, which obviously we only have a certain amount of time to give you this presentation, but we can cut all of this data by different demographic groups and indeed any key target audience. So if we want to see who's really driving these uplifts, is it a particular demographic? Is it a particular segment? You can slice and dice the data and customize it in that way. Despite it being a syndicated product, there are ways of being able to customize it to your brand's needs. So now that we've looked at advertising, let's have a quick look at the celebrities our consumers are saying they feel the most positive about. So this is a word cloud that shows which celebrities all age groups feel the most positive about. We're showing this because I think it would be good for retailers to consider in terms of future collaborations potentially, or even advertising campaigns. So this is an unaided question. So respondents, our consumers, are mentioning these celebrities without there being a prompted list. So it's just top of mind celebrities for them. And the larger the text, the more that name garnered positive reaction. You can see amongst a nationally representative sample, because our data is nationally representative, we make sure it's that so we can report the findings onto the US population as a whole. And we can see here that it's Kate Hudson and the Jennifers in particular are particularly strong. So Jennifer Lopez, Aniston, and this is amongst the entire female consumer base. If we actually cut that down now and we isolate the younger audience, this is now looking at the celebrities most mentioned amongst the 16 to 24s, you can see the story changes. It's that younger celebrity that's more top of mind. So Selena Gomez, Kylie Jenner, and Rihanna, they seem to be the most mentioned. So those would be great considerations for collaborations or indeed advertising. And then moving on to the 25 to 39-year-old age group, again, you see the Jennifers doing well, Kate Hudson, Reese Witherspoon, but also names like Jessica Simpson, which could demonstrate why her collection has been so successful, and Laura Conrad's as well. Interestingly, holding up the Brits, we've got Kate Middleton. She's also popping up here, although I think we can all agree that an ad campaign or collaboration with Kate is pretty unlikely, what with her giving birth to the fourth heir to the throne. But perhaps a line mirroring some of her classic style might be worth exploring. Now on to some of the more brand health, brand equity measures that the survey covers off. This is where we really get to understand how people are feeling about key brands. And it's where we look at the underlying health of a brand and how they're being perceived. Looking at this data, again, retailers should be pretty worried looking at this. Amazon has the highest percentage of people who like or love them, you can see here. So if we net up these two greens, and the key is here, you can see this is the percentage of respondents who say they love or like a lot the brand. We can see that netted together, 66% of consumers either like or a lot or love Amazon. Coles and Target also fare well here in the number 2 and number 3 position. But for those on the far right, like Sears, there is certainly room for improvement, which isn't surprising as much has been talked about in terms of their challenges. J.Crew is also one that isn't faring well for the love and like a lot metric. I think they would want to see their love and like a lot metrics improve. I think going back to Sears, what's really worrying is the percentage of the dislikes, which is this top bar in red. This is the percent of people who said that they dislike the retailer. You can see there's also similar negativity towards Walmart, with nearly 1 in 5 claiming to dislike them. So now what we wanted to do is isolate that affinity towards the brands by age. So what we've done is we've isolated the 16 to 24-year-olds, which is the blue line, and the 25 to 34-year-olds, which is the orange line. And we're looking at the percentage of those that either like a lot or love the brand netted together. Again, what should get all retailers' attention here is how well Amazon performs. Over 70% have a positive opinion of Amazon amongst both demographic groups. Target and Victoria's Secrets are also faring very well amongst the younger demographics. And again, looking at those on the far right, those that are faring less well for these age groups. You can see some aren't terribly surprising, such as Chico's. I mean, Chico's, for one, isn't known as being a brand which is aimed squarely at the younger age range, but your Lane Bryants, J. Crews, they would probably want to be seeing their percentages up, especially for the 25 to 34 age group. So now what happens when we split Affinity by these demographics? So you can see this first bar shows the overall score amongst a nationally representative audience. Then we cut the data by age, by location, by household income, and also by dress size. And just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, if there's any particular demographic or key target audience you want to cut the data by for your brand and your competitors, we can do that. We profile our panelists on so much information, we'll know that about them. So let's have a look at Affinity now, split by those demographics. You can see Amazon and eBay, who are clearly pure online players, they perform strongly across the board, with the exception of the 50 pluses. You can see we've highlighted that here. So potentially an opportunity for other retailers to maybe capitalize on. Now moving from brand affinity to consideration. So this is where we're asking our consumers, thinking about retailers, which one would you consider buying clothes, footwear, or accessories from? And you can see the deck of cards really kind of reshuffles now. Amazon is faring less well competitively. So consumers, they're feeling positive and they have a strong affinity towards Amazon overall, but they aren't particularly strongly considering them for women's wear. And you can see that that was also borne out earlier in the low top of mind scores, the low unaided awareness scores for Amazon. My feeling and our theory here is that that's just a matter of time. As an aside, on a separate note, you can see JCPenney and Walmart are faring particularly well amongst the plus size audience on consideration. So now what we're looking at on this chart is both consideration and preference. So how the question works is we will ask consumers, which of the following brands out of the 150 plus brands that we track would you consider? And then amongst that consideration set, we're a bit more stricter, and the criteria is stricter, because then we're asking them, and of those you'd consider, which of the brands are your preferred brand? And you can see that Coles wins for preference here, with 39% of consumers claiming it's one of their preferred brands. Amazon, though, again, is showing up strongly here. Sears doesn't do as well. In particular, it's not rating high on preference relative to its entire consideration ranked position. And you can see other brands like Lane Bryant's, Coors, New York and Company, Express, Chico's, they're also faring less positively here. So Coles leading the pack on preference. Let's have a little look as to why that may be. So this is where we're asking respondents to attribute associations from a list to all of the brands. And you can see Coles is particularly owning perceptions of comfortable. It's seen as a youthful brand, fresh, and importantly, worth every penny. And also energetic. So you can see amongst this competitive set we've drawn out where it over and under indexes on each attribute. Okay, we're going to move on now to in-store and online. Who's winning and why? So now we're moving from consideration to the all-important purchase behavior. So here we're asking, have you ever bought from these retailers before? What you want to see for your brand is a big green box. They're the people who've purchased in the last month. The orange box is those who've ever purchased, which you would argue is lapsed customers. The red is those who've never purchased. and the grey is those who are completely unaware. Just as an aside, we have different within the survey, you can look at a more recent time frame for customer status. So if you want to look at those customers who've shopped within the last month or 3 months, we also collect that data. So onto this chart, what we can see here is that 62% of women have said they've purchased from Walmart in the last year. So you want to keep that orange block small, as you don't want lapsed customers. So let's jump over and have a look at Amazon's score here. And you can see that there's 26% of consumers who still haven't even bought yet from Amazon. You can bet that they're working on getting that percentage down. And what's interesting is, look, comparatively, they have one of the lowest levels of lapsed customers, suggesting once you get a customer in at Amazon, they're likely to repeat purchase. Once they convert shoppers, they don't particularly suffer from them not coming back, which is evidenced by the low orange box. Only 20% haven't shopped recently who have at any time. So what does that mean for the rest of the retail mix? Again, looking at the far right, you'll see J.Crew, Chico's, Zara, Bloomingdale's, and Saks, with high percentages of those who haven't purchased. This won't be that surprising per se for companies that have a niche audience. So, I don't know, those brands which appeal to, I don't know, high household incomes, for example. But for brands like J.Crew, again, seeing that 23% of their customers haven't purchased in the last 12 months, so they haven't been able to engage them to come back, and instead they've slipped into being lapsed customers. That's a concern for them, and no doubt they're working to get that segment back into the store to purchase. Now we're looking at in-store satisfaction. So this is asking satisfaction amongst consumers who have been to the store. And we've split this both by in-store and online. And when we look at those who have visited a particular retailer, so again, this is amongst consumers, we can see that the retailer Chico's is faring very strongly in terms of their in-store experience. 84% of their consumers claim to be satisfied. Again, Sears and Walmart are on the far right, so performing less well. In 1 second, we'll look at why. What is it that Chico's is particularly getting right amongst its consumers? Where's it doing well? And what can we learn from that? So here we're looking at what's driving that in-store experience. And we can see that customers are saying that the stores are clean and there's knowledgeable staff, nice fitting rooms. They're really outperforming the average for all key measures. The red line is the line for Chico's, and this grey line is the line for the average of the brands you've seen throughout the deck. Again, if we want to present to your own brand, we can customize this average to make sure that it's a correct average for your competition. That's flexible for us to do, of course. So overall, we can see that Chico's is outperforming the average for all key measures. Now, if we zero in on the actual product, we can see Chico's really does fare well. 94% of consumers say that the product is comfortable. Again, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, lifewear isn't a trend, it's a new lifestyle shift, and Chico's seems to be capitalizing on this pretty well. And now, if we drill down into the different types of apparel, we can see that it's the tops that are faring particularly well, as do trousers and jeans. You can see dresses and coats, they're pretty much tied with average, and you can see shoes, boots, underwear, suits and tailoring, they're underperforming the average of the competitive set shown throughout. Now let's jump into an online satisfaction. So which brands perform the best on online satisfaction? And we can see that Amazon does very well, unsurprisingly. But you can see they're tying with Nordstrom with overall satisfaction online. 87% of consumers say they're very satisfied with Nordstrom's online experience. Again, let's jump in and see what they're doing so well, what they're getting right. Nordstrom consumers, they're feeling an overwhelming satisfaction with just the online process as a whole. So delivery options, the returns policy, views of the products. You could argue there's some room for improvement with product reviews, but overall, it's that online process which they're really nailing. How do they rate the product? You can see that Nordstrom outperforms the average on consumers' perceptions of stylishness, being on trend, and being of high quality to suit their style. Performing less well on perceptions of being comfortable. They may want to build it out a bit online by showcasing comfortable clothes. That's one area where you could potentially find some actionable kind of next steps from the data. And finally, another interesting angle is that consumers don't really perceive Nordstrom's prices to be as discounted as other retailers, which we've seen as well, as they aren't necessarily as heavily reliant on heavy promotion. And their customer isn't necessarily trained to wait for the discount like you find with other retailers. And we have a whole section within the survey which focuses on price perception, perceptions of discounting, and so on, and the impact that then has on things like perceptions of premium. So what we've done, I mean, the survey, as Erin at the beginning mentioned, it's in excess of over 150 measures. It's all encompassing. It covers all areas of the shopping behavior, shopping experience, brand health, and customer experience. But what we've done is just cherry picked some brands, cherry picked some measures. So we're really just showing you the tip of the iceberg of all the data that we have here. But just to give you some key takeaways, food and eating out. This is an area from that disposable income section where we could see it could be an area to capitalize on, and for your store to gain share of wallet by potentially incorporating a food experience within. Online versus in-store, we see that overall there is more likely, shopping is more likely to be done in store than online across all age groups, but the 16 to 34-year-olds are more likely to say they shop in store than online, which is arguably quite surprising, especially with all the kind of concern around the rise of the online presence. Amazon, Amazon, Amazon. You can see that we've referenced this brand throughout, this retailer throughout. So consumers have a strong affinity towards them, and a huge percentage of their customers say they have yet to make, a huge percentage of consumers say they have yet to make a women's wear purchase. Certainly a retailer to be watching closely. And they do particularly well amongst the younger demographic. The 50 pluses is potentially an area where other retailers could steal market share. Activewear. Consumers in the market for activewear is waning a bit of late, so certainly something to watch closely. Jeans are on the rise and tops and t-shirts are strong. And we've pulled out two examples. In store, we pulled out Chico's as their consumer has the highest satisfaction level. Fantastic in-store experience. And with the product, we know that comfort is key. And with regards to online, Nordstrom is tying with Amazon for overall online satisfaction amongst their consumers. They do particularly well for shipping, site navigation, and being perceived as stylish and being on trend. So that's the presentation. Over to you, Erin.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. That was terrific. And hopefully you all enjoyed the insights there. What happens next? Some of you on the phone may be curious about how your brand does for these measures, so reach out. We are happy to share with you a complimentary session, much of what you saw today on your own brand and a key set of competitors. So reach out to Sarah and myself. With that, we're going to take some questions. They've already started coming through. So the first question, Sarah, over to you, that was asked: how many people are in the overall sample?
Sure. So we're interviewing 175 consumers every day in the US alone. That's 5,000 a month. That's 60,000 a year. We do have this product in both the UK and US, and the numbers are the same. So if you net up both markets together, it's 120,000 consumers being interviewed every year.
Great. Another question: how many total retailers are tracked? You may have just answered that, but if not, maybe worth repeating.
No, that's fine. Over 150 retailers. We will be tracking most retailers that anyone will have heard of in the US. And important to note, if we don't currently track a retailer and you're interested in the data, we can add a brand within 24 hours. Admittedly, it wouldn't have the historical data because we just start tracking from that day, but very easy for us to insert a brand if you're interested in subscription.
Great. Someone else has asked, how can I get access? I'll take that one, if you will. So right now, just reach out to us. It is a new product. We're really excited about it. So reach out to myself or Sarah, and we'd be happy to take you through it. Again, share some insights with you. But at a very high level, just know that there's a couple ways you can access this type of data: from an online interface that's updated every day, and or quarterly presentations where we would do something like this for your competitive set and present it to you with the key takeaways. So it gives you a sample of how you can work with us. Another couple questions, and then any that we don't get to, we will be sure to follow up with. A question of how often is the data updated?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So the data is uploaded every 24 hours. So if we log into the dashboard today, we'd see data right up till yesterday.
Great. I think that's about it for questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. As I mentioned, there will be a recording of this. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and look forward to speaking with many of you about your own brands and the data that we have. Thank you again.
Thanks.